Temporary, and the United States Senate.
And Chad, if you're still with us, how many, what is it, several hundred seats in the balcony? What would you guess is the seating capacity for others?
There are about 400 seats in the balcony or so, and the Speaker's office had said that the demand for this particular event far exceeded any event they had seen before. Remember, we had Ukrainian leader Petro Poroshenko here in the fall, in September, and it was pretty well attended, but this is something different. Each office, Democrats and Republicans, get one ticket to the gallery for the chamber, and as you say, Bill, the Speaker's staff has said that they have had 10 times the number of requests for tickets than are the seats available in the gallery. And even on the floor, just about 20 minutes ago, I saw some Capitol workers. They were bringing in some plastic folding chairs that they were sitting along the back rail for extra members and staff who want to sit in the chamber here.
That's Bob Menendez, the Democrat from New Jersey, who just last night at AIPAC delivered a stunning rebuke of any negotiations ongoing with Iran. And Joe Manchin, the moderate Democrat from West Virginia, was in camera there as well. So as they now get ready, those who have decided to attend this today, I want to bring in my colleague Brett Baer, who's with me as well. And Brett, good morning to you. You wonder, and you know the power of Benjamin Netanyahu and his ability to communicate and speak now. Age 65, he's been doing this for his entire adult life, both in and out of politics. What a personal history he has. Educated at MIT, educated at Harvard, fought on behalf of Israeli Special Forces in Israel, wounded twice in combat. That's the resume he brings to this address today, and based on the people you talked to today, what is his message to the American people, and for that part, the rest of the world now watching?
Well, Bill, history shows that Prime Minister Netanyahu has made the case very well, both in front of the United Nations, other speeches, about the existential threat from Iran. What we're hearing on background from Israeli officials is that this will get into the substance of the P5+1 deal. This will get into the U.S.-Iran negotiations that are ongoing. This will get into some of the details. Now, they're saying it's not going to get into the classified negotiations that are ongoing, that this is all open source, because they're addressing directly the concerns of the Obama administration, as they said they were really worried about this. But they are going to lay out the case why no deal is better than a bad deal. And that is what Bibi Netanyahu will do in front of Congress, a Congress that, despite 50-plus members not being there on the Democratic side, is, as you can see, packed and will likely be very receptive.
Yeah. Brett, it's Martha in New York. I mean, it's stunning, as you lay it out, to consider that John Kerry is in Switzerland negotiating an arrangement with Iran at the same moment that the Israeli Prime Minister is stepping into a packed house to discuss the threat that Iran poses to Israel, something that, you know, certainly prior presidents could hardly imagine themselves of doing at this moment.
Martha, you're right, and you know, it's important to point out that this goes beyond the U.S.-Iran nuclear deal. You will likely hear Prime Minister Netanyahu lay out the existential threat from Iran, both on supporting terrorists as the #1 state sponsor of terrorism, and also about basically having a spread out effort to take over large portions of their neighborhood. You look at what's happening in Yemen. You look at what's happening in Iraq, actually, as the head general, Suleiman, is leading the forces, Iranian forces, into Tikrit, Saddam Hussein's hometown. It's hard to believe, if you look back at the U.S. effort in Iraq and all of the people who served on the ground, that Iranian troops are leading the fight against ISIS in Tikrit. That's shocking.
Brett, Susan Rice the other day called this move today destructive, and the president walked that back a little bit last night, calling it not destructive so much as it is a distraction at the moment. But knowing the president, as Ed Henry reports in the last 40 minutes, that he will not be watching this speech, and knowing that also he's admitted publicly many times that he's not so sure they can even get a deal in the end with Iran. So if we move past March and into the summer months and you're 2 years down the road, what do all these efforts of flying John Kerry to Europe and the Middle East for the past 24 months, what in the end would the administration have to show for that work?
Well, it's a good question, Bill. I think that all indications are this administration still really wants a deal. desperately wants a deal, that they want to get across the finish line with something. I think that the hope on the Israeli side is that the Iranians will not agree to a deal. And that's where you are. There are still from everything we're hearing, there's a big distance between the U.S. and Iran on substance, on a couple of key areas, the breakout time it would take to get a nuclear bomb, all of the specific enrichment efforts of the centrifuges and the numbers. That said, there is a real push in this administration to get a deal, that they're going to try very hard to continue to do that, and that's why Secretary Kerry is in Geneva right now.
Right, you make a great point about Iran's emerging influence over the entire Middle East. When you look at Egypt, and you look at Damascus and Libya and all the areas that we're seeing influence from Iran, and now you've got this interesting result of all that. Saudi Arabia and Egypt may be forming a stronger alliance with Israel than we are at this moment. Quite odd.
Yeah, and I think that's been developing over time. I think you can also add Jordan to the mix, UAE, as you mentioned, Egypt, Saudi Arabia. These Gulf Arab states are as concerned about Iran's expansion through the region as anybody. Frankly, more concerned in what they say and what they've done than the U.S. has been as a policy matter. So I think you're going to see a real concern from Bibi Netanyahu about this, not only the substance of the nuclear deal, but also the expansion of Iran's presence throughout the Middle East. I want to bring in a panel here we have in the studio. Joining me now, Yogi Dreesen, Managing Editor of Foreign Policy Magazine, A.B. Stoddard, Associate Editor of The Hill, and syndicated columnist Charles Cranning. Panelists, welcome. We're waiting for the Prime Minister. What do you think, Yogi? What will he lay out to Congress, and what is he charged to do?
He's charged, as he sees it, to make the best case he can against what he sees as, in explicit terms, both existential, almost apocalyptic, and he's referencing the Holocaust both implicitly and explicitly, and saying this is a threat on par with that. So he's playing to a constituency here and one at home. And it's worth remembering that the White House keeps saying they'll veto the current bill that would attempt to impose sanctions if talks fail. But we need to remember that if there is a deal, at some point the White House has to go to Congress and say, lift sanctions permanently. That's not being talked about as much as it should be. So he has a near-term goal and a long-term goal. And the long-term goal is torpedo a deal down the road by preventing Congress from doing what it has to do, which is lift sanctions permanently.
There's all this focus on Israeli politics, and obviously as election coming up March 17th. Is it possible that the conventional wisdom going in may flip here as he makes this case about the threat from Iran?
Certainly. I mean, you've seen Israeli polls bounce around. First, he was up when the speech controversy blew up. Now he's down a little bit. There's some polls saying he may get as few as 18 seats in the next Israeli election. Even still, he'll probably have the ability to form a government. But it's fascinating. We have a sense of conventional wisdom here. The conventional wisdom in Israel is here one day, here a different day, and probably will be there later again today.
We should point out, Obi, that it is obviously broadcast live in Israel, but there is a monitor, apparently, who is going to black out anything that tends towards the politics of ahead of the election. I don't know who this is and who has the switch, but it's interesting, the whole dynamic here. As we're watching the House floor, they're getting ready to